Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Press Break podcast. I'm Chelsea Late, now in HD. I got a new laptop. You're watching the video. Long time coming. Joined, of course, by Tyler and Jamie. We are here to discuss upsets. Like, it was like week of upsets. I guess like upsets if you're fans of certain teams, and just like really good basketball if you're a neutral observer. Like, I think the three of us were this whole weekend. I don't think any of us had like a lot of skin in the game, but
nope.
Oh man, it was such a good weekend. Like, started off, and like we knew last week going into this. First of all, we're gonna do a lot of like, oh, we were wrong today. I think.
Says who? No, I'm just kidding.
Last week we came on this podcast, we were like, UConn can't, blah 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 blah, and then we'll get into that. But
I don't think it was so much UConn can't. It's they had not proven that they would.
Exactly.
And then they did.
And then they did.
Exactly.
So already big matchups going into the weekend. Then chaos just ensues in the best way. JuJu Watkins, just
goodness gracious.
Just no words, honestly. That's why I'm stuttering right now. And then like days later, UConn just like struts into Columbia, South Carolina, and absolutely delivers one of the like most talked about games of the season, and something we will talk about probably for years to come. So that happened, and then there was also a Texas LSU game that Tyler was at, and there was just a lot. And then like Unrivaled one-on-one tournament, that was a whole other thing as well. Go Aaliyah Edwards, but we're going to stick to college today. So, I guess we'll go in chronological. Starting with Thursday night's UCLA versus USC game, which like the Battle of LA. Tyler was traveling this weekend because you were at that.
It's been a long week, a fun week, but it's been a long week.
Yeah. So UCLA USC Battle of LA, as everyone was calling it, one of the most like talked about games leading into it because UCLA was undefeated. Number 1 in the country. USC has JuJu Watkins. There's all this like discourse going into it. And then, going back to what we were saying last week, we were like, yeah, like I'm not sure USC, has the cohesion and the depth to go up against Lauren Betts and all of that. And then because it was like USC was up really early and then UCLA came back and then JuJu went on an absolute tear. And like, it was thrilling from start to finish. So yeah, Tyler, you were there. Let's just start with you.
Yeah.
You were there. Like, what was it like being there and like being in that energy as the game was just like.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, both the games, like you mentioned, I was at Texas LSU. Like, both of these games, like, were truly, like, two of the best environments I had seen. Like, I don't know if I'd seen from the USC, like, their student section, when it comes to games I've personally been to, their student section was locked in. I talked to these guys at the front because it was pouring down rain in LA, which like is immediately a play. I didn't even know it rained in LA, and I picked the 2 days that I'm out there. It's just downpouring.
They need it, so let's go.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for them, but I didn't pack rain stuff.
But not for yourself?
No, I'm not. Selfishly, I was not happy for it. But the reason I bring up the rain is because the students were in line like hours and hours before to be in for this game. Like, it was like a true like big time college basketball matchup. There was people with like body paint on, and I literally went and asked them, I'm like, how did this survive the rain? And they were like, very strategically. And I was like, okay, man.
They probably like painted it in the lobby.
I don't know how they did it. I don't know, man. But shout out to them. But no, like the crowd was super engaged. Like, it was super fun. USC like held down home court, like from atmosphere perspective. Like, I didn't, like, honestly going into it, I didn't know how split it would be, if it would be split. USC held it down. Like, there was very limited blue in that stadium, so it was really cool. Cheryl Miller was there, and all like the USC alumni. I got to talk to Cheryl Miller.
I saw the video. If you haven't seen the video, if you're watching or listening, haven't seen the video, Tyler was like hanging out with. She was like hanging over his shoulder. And
it was a whole thing. I
was like,
bro, I don't get starstruck. I really don't. Like, and I haven't gotten starstruck in a very long time. Cheryl Miller, I got starstruck. I was like,
bro, that's like when I met Cheryl Swoops last year. I was just like, oh.
I mean, that's one of the goats. That's one of the goats.
Exactly.
But I mean, to get into the game itself, to be honest, like, USC still didn't really win by the things that we were worried about.
It's true.
JuJu Watkins just had one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in my entire life. And certainly one of the greatest performances I've seen in person in my entire life. But I've never seen a player truly dominate and dictate both sides of the ball for the entirety of a game in the way that JuJu Watkins did. Like, just to have the energy. Like, what it was 38 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 8 blocks.
That was literally what I was just going to say. All you have to do to look at how generational this game was for JuJu was look at the fact that she got 8 blocks as a guard.
And most of those blocks were on Lauren Betts. Like, it was on the help side. It was, like, crashing down. It was helping. But, like, the timing of it. Because JuJu Watkins, as a defender, she's a very, very good defender. But she does take a lot of risk, right? Like, when she's, like, going for steals or going for blocks. Like, she's just a risk-taking defender. Now she's athletic enough and like the build, like it works a lot and she's very good at timing it. But I have never seen someone consistently get the timing correct over and over. And I don't know exactly what she found, but like it was just working the entire game. So like, again, there were some really good depth pieces that locked in. And we talked about on the offensive side of the ball more so, like who was going to be there to help JuJu. And I kind of left this game, again, I mean, the only other player in double figures was Kiki, and she only had 13. A lot of that kind of came towards the end.
She did her work late.
Yes, like very late in the game, but it was
needed, and it was like that's great.
Yeah. It was Clarice Akunwafo and Kennedy Smith that were the cavalry in this game. Because I'll tell you, the moment I knew USC was going to win this game, it was about 5 minutes left, 4 or 5 minutes left, and Kennedy Smith claps in Kiki Rice's face. And just smiles while on defense. And I sat up in my seat. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I see the next possession, and for the rest of the game, Kennedy Smith starts picking up full court. Yeah. And just accepted this like kind of like game within the game. And one that showed me so much about Kennedy Smith, who I was already a major fan of, but seeing that in person, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a star. Yeah. And then Clarice, like on Lauren Betts, like the way that she was able to hold it down, like again, it was with help, it was strategic. But she did she laid the foundation for what was, for Lauren Betts standards, not a completely dominant game, 18-13, 5-13 shooting. Honestly, for Lauren Betts standards, you'll absolutely take that for USC, especially when you're a team that you don't really have like that true size to match up in that way, like in a very like kind of 1-to-1 level with Lauren. If you're USC, you left that game incredibly happy, and Clarice was a massive part of it. And also like the ball pressure before the pass gets to Lauren, whether it be from JuJu or from Kennedy or from Talia, like it was the defense that won USC this game, and then JuJu just did everything on the offensive end to push them past. So it's a weird thing because it's like obviously USC wins this game, and like there's so much credit to give for that.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times that JuJu can have this level of game, because this was an all-time game that it took for them to win this game. But just, like, you got to give them credit.
It was just like everything fell into place. It was like you had that atmosphere. You had JuJu playing this absolutely like iconic generational game. You have, them being able to stop Lauren Betts a little bit. And then, it just all came together and they were able to win. But like, oh man, I can't get over and like JuJu also surpassed, I think it was 1,500 points in that game. So like, and like she's not even done her sophomore season. She scores, I think she's at something like 23 points a game or something like that. I'd have to like look, but it's around there. It was like a week ago. But like she produces like every night. 24?
Goodness.
I was close.
Goodness.
But 24 points a game, like that's like for college, like that's a good amount. And like I am running out of words to be able to describe her. And like, this is sophomore in college JuJu Watkins. Like, if we're looking at the future, I can't. Like, that's nuts. Also, like, if the Toronto Tempo don't tank for her in season 1, I don't even know what we're doing here. JuJu to Toronto. Anyway, Jamie, I won't rant about that anymore. But so like, I just like, I guess, like your thoughts on the game. You always give us the coach's perspective. So like, and what I'm hearing is like, what happened?
I'm really excited about this. As soon as Tyler started talking about Clarissa Kunimafo,
Yeah.
like if you're watching video, you saw my face completely light up, because it was a masterclass in game planning, in post defense. Um, you've got to be really prepared for a matchup against this kind of elite player. And I said that I thought that a lot of the potential of this game would come down to the ability for Raya Marshall and Clarissa Kunimafo to come in and defend Lauren Betts, and I wasn't quite sure if they would do so. I will say, if I had done a little bit more research, I would have probably been more inclined to give USC more of a chance because they have done a great job on post players in the past, those two specifically, including Lauren Betts herself last year. And so I maybe didn't give them the credit they deserved as far as their potential there, but regardless of what I said beforehand, it doesn't matter because they went out and they really showed it in game. I think that to have your highest minute total in the season come against the number one player in the country at your position on the number one team, like Kunimafo had, and frankly, she had last year as well, had her season high in minutes against UCLA in a win. So it's really impressive to go out and do that. I also want to say to go out there and to know, yes, my role here is to defend and to be there on the offensive end, maybe look for a rebound or something. Not taking a shot attempt in over 20 minutes. You know what? That's knowing your role. I love that. But for UCLA, the fact that they had to face mostly single coverage on Betts really interrupted the flow of their offense. So much of what they do is recognizing where there's going to be opportunities, recognizing where the double is coming from and having a cutter come off of that. And there just really wasn't that. Almost all of Lauren Betts' possessions started out in single coverage. They wouldn't send a double until she put the ball on the floor. And so you're looking at a lot less risky of defensive plays. And especially, Tyler, you're talking about the fact that JuJu is kind of a risk taker. And that's such a great, important point because from what I see, it seems to me that USC has a defensive scheme they mostly stick to, and then JuJu probably has license to kind of do what she sees fit. And then everyone adjusts around her. So you see some plays where they get burned a little bit by trying to go help, trying to, go through a passing lane, something like that. But in this game, very, very rarely was she burned. They did a really great job of, okay, as soon as Lauren Betts is dribbling into the middle, we're sending a double. We're having someone poke at it. We're sending someone from the backside and poking it out from her. They did that on like the second possession of the game. They had Kaylee Heckle coming in and just tipping the ball away from Lauren Betts. I thought that was really, really impressive. Also, to keep her off of the spot, not allowing her to go down and just bury them on the block. When she comes out for that ball screen and then she dives, that's part of what makes her so good is she's so mobile. So she's coming out to the perimeter, she's screening, and then she's diving to the block. They're not letting her go and get established on the repost. And that is so difficult to prevent, especially when you can't just front her and make them pass over, because the two times that USC did that, they were able to score pretty easily because their passing has improved so much. So I was just absolutely blown away by the execution defensively. I thought that, I've also said in the past that having losses is a benefit if you want to go win a national championship. It can expose some things here. Again, critique is out of love. I'm obsessed with Lauren Betts. I'm obsessed with her game. There's a couple times where she was being forced kind of middle. There was a couple times where she was over on the right block, so she would be turning and using her left hand. And she had a pretty open lane to go across the lane and go use her right hand. Now, there probably would have been a double coming, but she was able to get through the double quite a few times. There was some open lanes that I felt like she sort of passed up because she was anticipating the help coming. But again, that's a really nitpicky thing. It's just something that when you're at this level of play and you're trying to elevate to another level beyond that most people don't ever achieve, those are the things you're going to get in the film room. And I'm sure she's going to go in and she's going to look at it and say,
she
yep,
had mentioned it in the post game even.
Yep, I just overthought that one a little bit.
Yeah, there was some moments in the post game where she was talking about like posting like fading away or all different kind of things like with it, like the style of shots that she was taking when she was in the post.
And that's the thing is she's very analytical. She's very smart. That's why she's as good as she is. And so I think that this is something that's going to elevate her game even more, which is terrifying for anyone else facing UCLA, but very exciting and something that's going to make the second matchup coming up in, 2 weeks now, absolutely fascinating. And so I'm super excited about that. But yeah, absolute incredible defensive performance. Shout out to the posts. Y'all, I said they had to do their big one. They did. Very fun to watch.
And like the exciting part about this, they have 2 matchups in like just under 2 or around 2 weeks. And like we were saying before, JuJu can't have that kind of performance every single night. Like
maybe she can. I don't know, man. At this point,
if anyone's gonna do it, it's JuJu. But like, we're not gonna bank on the fact that she's gonna get 8 blocks and like 30, however many points in the next game, because UCLA is gonna meticulously go through the tape of this and come in with a game plan to literally like stop JuJu and do all of this, right? So like, it's very interesting because they're going to play again and then likely see each other in the Big Ten tournament. And then who knows what seeding is going to be like going in. Like this is like gearing up, especially over the next couple of years. Lauren Betts is coming back to UCLA next year. JuJu's only a sophomore. Like this is kind of ramping up to be one of those like circle on your calendar in August kind of games. Because like, this is just the beginning. And I mean, when we flip to like our next game, which is more of like, I would say an established, I wouldn't call it I don't know. I don't think
it's not a rivalry between the teams. It's a rivalry between the fan bases.
There you go. That's it. With UConn and South Carolina, I mean, we might as well pivot into that now because it's kind of the difference where like Paige has been playing South Carolina for years. They haven't got a win. There's a little bit of that stuff going on. That's kind of the like advanced version of the rivalry we're kind of seeing against budding between UCLA and USC. But man, that UConn South Carolina game, like I was first, like, I don't even know where to start. Like the defense, the game planning, the absolute like, and I don't mean this as I think South Carolina fans will also say this, but the absolute like lack of what this team usually is, like where were they this entire game?
I mean, there was no edge from South Carolina that like we're used to, like whether it just be like I feel like there's a lot of things you could bank on with a Dawn Staley team, whether it be like effort or like whatever, and those were the things that felt they were missing in this game, which was just not like a Dawn Staley team.
It didn't even look like the same team we've seen in so many games. Like we joke about how all 3 of the teams we support have gotten handed an absolute loss by South Carolina this season, but like when you look at those games and those teams, like this wasn't that team. And I don't know what was going on because, other than Ashlyn Watkins, who has been out for a while now and won't come back this season, like they had their usual pieces. And like we were talking about last week, like they had the ability, like the players have the ability to like match up well against this UConn team who isn't as deep by a large margin. And then UConn just came in and like wire to wire took over that game defensively. Even Paige Bueckers didn't have the biggest scoring game, but she was facilitating. She was leading on the floor. She was assisting, rebounding, like doing everything else she needed to do, which I think is like the bread and butter of Paige Bueckers, is like the fact that she doesn't need a 30-point game to have the biggest impact on the game. Like she just puts her hands in every little part of the game. But like Azzi Fudd going off was wild. Like it was just all of the things that we would have said, oh, UConn needs to do this in order to be successful. They just like did. And then it also happened to be like a bad day for South Carolina. Like that was wild. I know, like Jamie, you and I watched it live. Tyler caught it after because he was in Texas. But like we were just in our chat and Tyler was like, what's going on? And I'm like UConn's just...
I couldn't, like, I literally, like, I remember I was driving in downtown Austin, and I'm like, I'm waiting, I'm getting to the arena.
Which is an adventure in itself. Like, you gotta be locked in for that.
I was not looking at the score, like, nothing. Like, I was,
drive, people.
look, put your phones away when you drive,
Yeah.
But I get in the parking garage, and I genuinely thought my app was messed up. Like I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I mean to dive into it, like we said it was going to take superstar performances, really in both these games with USC and UConn. Like, how did they win? It's superstar performances because from a team aspect, from a depth aspect, it's very clear. Like the opponents that they were going against were the deeper teams. But when Azzi Fudd outscores South Carolina's starting lineup, what I mean, like it's I mean, we know that Azzi it's just been a matter of like, can she do it? It's not a capability of like she just has to produce in this way. It's not a talent thing, but it's truly just been getting her consistent, getting like having being on the court.
Confident.
Like it's yes, absolutely. It's never been like a true like, is she capable of this? It's just can and will she produce at this level?
Opportunity to do so.
Yes, absolutely. And so to see her have this game, like, because there's been a couple games now, like the third quarter against Ole Miss, I remember like around Thanksgiving week, like where that game was tight, and Azzi is the one that put a stop to that run from Ole Miss. And so like there's been moments so far this season, and I love this for Azzi so much that she got this moment because again, when we were talking about it last week, I don't think any of us, and like yes, we obviously all picked South Carolina. We didn't expect UConn to win this game, but I don't think it was. We knew the route was through superstar performances, and we knew that they have superstars on this UConn team. We just haven't been able to see it on a consistent basis in this way, and so to have this performance is massive. And from South Carolina, like it's late in the game, right? We're late. We're deep. We're into the deep end of the season, but the production, frankly, from the starting lineup is not where it needs to be at. And I mean, especially with the way that Joyce Edwards has come along, and especially on a team like South Carolina, starting is not everything, right? It's not like the way that they like the minutes are distributed. It's not even necessarily about starting. It's about who's in the moments when they need to be. And right now, I feel like there's a bit of like kind of I don't know if it's seniority or if there's like what exactly the reason is, but it might be worth looking at starting lineup changes and really truly deciding that Joyce Edwards is going to be the player that can lead you to a national championship. Because again, like right now, it's just like there's been some just rough performances from the older players at times, and again, when one player on UConn outscores your entire starting lineup and your two leading scorers are Joyce Edwards and Mylasia Fulwiley, and they do so efficiently in this game, and like
off the bench.
Yeah, off the bench, and again, not saying like obviously South Carolina is a very, very good team. Like and this is not South Carolina. Like this is not the South Carolina that you are going to get, generally speaking, on any given day. Like this is probably the worst of it, frankly. Like I don't think it's going to get worse than this game for South Carolina. Because again, it was being at the UCLA game when they lost that one. That was like Lauren Betts was the gravity of Lauren. Like it was that felt like they like UCLA played their best game.
Yeah.
This one felt more like South Carolina played their worst game, and UConn genuinely like took advantage of it and ran with it with the star caliber players that they have. Yeah. It's a different feel, and I'll be very interested in seeing like the introspection that goes on from South Carolina going forward. Obviously, you don't blow everything up and change everything, but I'll just be interested in seeing if there's any changes because again, this is kind of becoming a trend, frankly, for some of the older players.
Yeah, and one player I want to talk to Jamie about because like we know Jamie loves a post player who I've been waiting to step up all season is Jana Al-Alfi. And like I know like
that crossover she had.
Oh, like that was a Jana Al-Alfi game, and I was like, oh, I hope like she gets the minutes. Like I know sometimes she has foul trouble. She hasn't been able to play much. She like since she came to UConn, but like this was the game where I was like, yes, like this is what like this is it because she like first of all she has a handle. Like, are you that crossover that you were just saying? Like, I audibly gasped when she did that. She had the floater going. She was defending, getting rebounds. I was like, yeah, Jamie, we need to talk about Jana because
Yeah. It was, I mean, Gino has been really high on Jana in her entire time at Stores. And we just, as you said, haven't really seen her yet. Dealt with a bunch of injuries, mostly sustained by playing with her national team. And so, okay, she's missed time in college, but she's played on a national level. And so she has this experience that we've seen time and time again be so valuable for players. And so, yeah, it's kind of felt like a matter of time before she was able to sort of break out. And so here we have a team in South Carolina that really doesn't play a center. They play forwards in the post, and they have some very good ones. But you have a UConn team that really hasn't had much post-production at all this year. And you finally have a game where you are not going to be successful without it. Because even if you have Azzi going off, you're still not going to be successful without having 20 really solid minutes from Jana, without South Carolina having to guard the post. That's the thing, is you need more players that have to draw attention, because otherwise you're sending extra players. You're having really easy backside help. And so to have Jana go out and execute pretty well, especially not having a ton of experience in those really high level elite matchups, is massive, especially considering they probably aren't going to see a lot of extreme competition again until we get into maybe late in the Big East tournament, if Creighton is like really firing. And then it would be another time where Jana probably has a big opportunity, since Creighton doesn't really play center either. And then you're talking about the NCAA tournament. And so really big for obviously the UConn resume, for the confidence of, I think, the team as a whole, but especially the confidence in being able to get something out of the post, specifically Jana El-Afi. And then, I mean, I think that part of it too is that you have a team that has had a lot of inconsistency, just as far as who's playing, who's healthy, things like that. You have pretty much a healthy team right now, especially by their standards. And you have Azzi able to play at the level that we've all known she's capable of playing at. We've seen at times, but not as much on this stage. And then you go and you get a very, very needed win. I talked back when, I believe it was after the loss to USC to Southern Cal, that I said that UConn just looked stagnant. Like, I was watching film on 2 times speed and people were standing around. That was not the case in this game. The movement was there. The flow was there. They had twice as many unguarded shots as South Carolina did. Like, they were able to find their spots. We're talking about teams that are in the Her Hoop Stats rating for South Carolina, number 2 in offensive rating, number 1 in defensive rating. And for UConn, they're number 1 in offensive rating and number 3 in defensive rating. So, like, these are teams that are the best of the best on both sides of the ball. But the thing with offense is the defense can't guard everything. So if you're talking about the very, very best of a team's offense versus the very, very best of a team's defense, the offense has the edge because there's move, counter move. There's punch, counter punch. The offense usually is able to find something if they are both at like the absolute pinnacle of what someone can do. And I really think that's what we saw from UConn in this game, because they turned their defense into offense, and on the offensive end of the floor, they were patient when they needed to be. They were efficient from start to finish. And ultimately they found, okay, this is our mismatch. Maybe this is our, not even mismatch. This is our person who's really feeling it today. This is our person that's getting it done. And that's Azzi Fudd, and just let her go off and really take over in the second half.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. But like, even like Azzi went off, Janet, but like even all the other players, like it was such a cohesive game. Like
other people shot.
Yeah.
Other people scored. Not something we've seen all season, like consistently.
What a concept.
What a concept is a well-rounded team effort. But the last player that I really want to briefly touch on is Ashlyn Shade, because she's a sophomore, came out huge for UConn last year with all of the injuries, all of the whatever, was starting as a freshman. And then this year has kind of like, with Azzi being back, Paige being back, all that stuff has kind of taken a little bit of a step back in the bench now, whatever. But like the way that Ashlyn Shade is able to she was one of the biggest reasons that they got ahead in the first half, because Azzi didn't really pop off until the second half. She was shooting from distance, but she was also getting offensive rebounds. Like one thing that UConn really did well was like get those second chance opportunities on offense, because like South Carolina was not catching their defensive rebounds whatsoever. You had Jana, but it was also, Ashlyn Shade and Paige and all those people like really crashing the glass. And Ashlyn, I think, despite the fact that she only had there was three shots from distance or whatever, she didn't score like to the volume of Azzi ended up doing, but like she was everywhere. And like when South Carolina isn't like putting in the effort to crash the glass, of course, like Ashlyn's going to come in and get those rebounds. And they were like, I think she only ended with like 4 or 5 rebounds on the game, but the ones that she got, I remember just being like those key possessions that they needed in order for UConn to get the second chance opportunity. So yeah, it was just like, again, full team effort. And just like, I sat there the whole time just being like, what is happening? But also this is so fun. Like it was fun to see UConn finally, like we said, finally find some cohesion, have a well-rounded game. Everyone's like was seeing Azzi like that was great. It was their first like win.
It's the game we've been waiting for.
Yeah,
like from UConn. It's the one that we've been waiting for.
Also ends South Carolina's 71 game home court stretch, streak that they had. Another one the last time, so it ended up being a 29-point game. And we obviously, her hoop stats, we pull up, all these stats. But the last time that they lost in the regular season by 29 points was in 2008. It was Dawn Staley's, the last time they lost at home. Yeah, I'm trying to get this stat right. So it's the last time they lost that bad at home in the regular season was December 2008 against UConn. And it was only Dawn Staley's like seventh home game as a coach. So yeah, that was a stat that Andy pulled up on her hoop stats for us. And then the other time they lost by that much, like regardless of home, whatever, was in 2018 in I think it was the Elite Eight against UConn again. So both of these like program history things have been against UConn, 29 points each time. And like, yeah, wild.
Yeah. I before we move on, Chelsea, I wanted to also Sarah Strong.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't really touch on Sarah Strong.
There's just so many of them.
We were talking about rebounds, 16 points, 13 rebounds on 6 of 10. Like UConn out rebounded by almost 20. Like it was 48 to 29 with 15
Because I will
rebounds.
say that's the other thing is that if you're looking at again South Carolina elite team, extremely capable of making adjustments, that's something they're going to have to be looking at really hard. And I know something that's going to be a priority for them because they've been getting kind of killed on second chance lately. They've been giving up 12.5 second chance points over the last 5 games. They've all of a sudden teams are getting like
it's the way to walk
rebounds in the last 5 games. Like they've been struggling a little bit. Yeah. Like, and so definitely something that's going to be
the one thing.
A big priority to stay successful going forward. But back to Sarah Strong.
Back to Sarah. But okay, that was the thing that
go ahead, Chelsea.
That I noticed first was the rebounds from South Carolina. But also, did you know that Sarah Strong's mom is the player development coach for the Boston Celtics? They showed the little thing on the screen. It was like, this is Sarah
former
Strong.
Dawn Staley teammate and everything. I know.
And played with Dawn Staley. Yep.
Like you know when you just sit there, the puzzle pieces just kind of click together. I was like, oh.
Yep.
We've now as women's basketball has progressed, the lore just keeps getting it gets deeper and deeper than it does. But I love I kind of mentioned it last week, but I want Sarah Strong and Joyce Edwards to be the matchup that takes again. these are two teams that are fantastic that play each other every year. I don't think it's a rivalry. It's not in the way that UConn has other rivalries, like which
it's
are
the fan rivalry.
It is that. But like this is like obviously the game wasn't close, but from a performance perspective with both Joyce and Sarah, like the foundation of what this can be from like this being the matchup to kind of elevate this, and like this is the one that we point out where like in every South Carolina UConn game for the next 3 years, that this is like the matchup. I was very, very pleased with round one of it. Obviously, the score wasn't close, but the performances for both.
The performances, their individual performances. And shout out to Brian, our producer, who just gave me the assist here. Sarah's mom is Allison Feaster. She's former Charlotte Sting player in the WNBA with Dawn Staley. She also went to Harvard and played women's basketball. Now she's the Boston Celtics player development coach. So if you are that level
coaches' kids tend to know something about basketball is what I hear.
We got another coach. That was literally the point. When you are a player and your mom is that level of like a coach / former player, and you have that kind of like love and ability and whatever, like, oh man, I'd be like, Mom, like, let's go shoot every single day. And so I'm sure that like, and I'm sure they're on the phone after every game. I'm sure there's a whole thing. But like, when I saw that, I was like, that checks out. So shout out, thanks Brian for that, just so we could if you wanted to Google her or anything. But Sarah Strong, and especially again as a freshman, and obviously now knowing who her mom is, obviously those things are going to be more advanced, but the fact that she was just like, she was another one of those players where again, like she got a double-double, basically had a double-double in the first half, was getting rebounds, was defensively just like, her and Jana together were just like completely stopping anything that Chloe Kitts was trying to do. They were like not fouling, which I don't like. The refs weren't calling very much in this game, but I also don't think it was like in an egregious way. Like I think it was like a well officiated game, which is kind of rare. But I was, as the fouls were starting to rack up at the end of the game, I was like, oh, okay, like this hasn't been like too bad so far. But they were avoiding fouls. They were stopping Chloe Kitts. They were like Joyce Edwards as well. Like she kind of started going off at the end of the game. And I was like just defensively, again, it was just a two-way performance from every single player. And I just sat there at one point being like, Sarah Strong, man, like again, with JuJu Watkins, like imagine in 4 years, imagine in however many years, like, like the fact that there's so much generational talent in the country right now, like, wild. So that was
in that vein. Quick digression that we didn't plan for.
Okay,
can we
talk about the other freshman we need to mention today?
Let's do it. You already know. Anchor down.
Mikayla Blakes.
We've been telling y'all.
Are you kidding me?
We've been telling y'all.
Back on our Vanderbilt, if you want to go watch the tape from us all season, all we do is talk about Vanderbilt and what
to a fault sometimes perhaps, but like there's not a lot of like analysis that needs to be done here except to say like, if you don't know, like learn, because oh my good, like
the fourth quarter into OT that she had
55 points. 55 points. So 2 weeks ago, she broke the D1 freshman record with 53 points.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, breaks her own record with 55 points.
Some slight. She's ridiculous.
She's ridiculous.
Shooting over 50% as a guard in both those games.
We might have to really start having some genuine All-American conversations about her on top of, like, I think National Freshman of the Year at this point is wrapped up. I love Sarah Strong, but like just from a pure production perspective, like, I feel like the only argument you can really make about Sarah Strong right now is like, well, if she was on a team with less talent around her, and then you get into hypotheticals, and that's not where I operate when it comes to awards. So like, Mikayla, I mean, how can you deny this? She broke the scoring record and then did it again, and all the rest of her performances show that it's not like a fluke. Like she's still out there doing it on on other nights too. So like it's, I mean, in the SEC, it's not some like there's not
against,
really
like
many
slouch competition.
No. Like it's not. This isn't like and I obviously don't mean this in any disrespectful way to like any like lower level like conference schools, but this isn't, like a player that's at a school that nobody's watching, that isn't ranked, that is breaking all these records and doing it against teams like, that just the general public doesn't know. Like this is the SEC.
Yeah.
And is doing it. And this is a program that has history, but hasn't been like at the top, anywhere near the top of the SEC for a minute. So, like, I mean,
man,
shout out to, obviously, we don't want to take too much time on it, but shout out to Mikayla, man.
Like, just so clutch too. Like all of these late game situations she finds herself in.
Built for it.
Built
for it.
For it. And like again, yeah, we talk about Vanderbilt a lot, but for good reason. Like
we put you on.
We put you, yeah. I'm sure we put so many people on. I'm just tooting our own horn. But oh man, okay. So speaking of rankings, though, like before we go, like I think I know the three of us are very much like rankings aren't everything. Don't put too much stock into them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna be like that. But the rankings, I think, took enough of a shakeup to talk about because you have. So before UCLA was like undisputed number 1, undefeated, right? Then they lose against USC, who's another top team. Then you have the Texas LSU game, which again, another top 10 matchup. Texas beats LSU. Then you have UConn beating South Carolina, who again, basically it was like if you beat South Carolina, you have that top 2, top 3 caliber. Like that was kind of the idea. So then all of this happens and then the rankings come out and it's just you have
a whole lot of movement.
Notre Dame's now number 1. Then South Carolina's 6.
Yeah.
6. So what? I guess again, I don't know how to frame this question because again, we don't really
I mean, it's a lot of chaos.
Yeah. Chaos. What do you? Okay,
You've
just
got
what
3 teams with votes for the first spot in the poll.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
I think honestly, I think it's pretty I honestly from my perspective, I would have been so Notre Dame obviously number 1, Texas number 2, UCLA number 3.
Yeah.
I think that there's genuine arguments to make about all of those. Now I think Texas might have the hardest argument to make, not from a quality of win or how what their losses are perspective, but you lost to Notre Dame, who was also in the argument. So you have the head-to-head, so you can't really make the argument for Texas because that kind of immediately kind of throws it out. For UCLA,
I'm surprised they dropped that much.
I was kind of surprised to see that too, because to me, you're the only team with 1 loss.
Yeah.
And you do it against another top-ranked team.
Yeah.
And you do it against one of the greatest performances we've ever seen. So I was I have really no issue with Notre Dame being number 1. I know people have talked about their losses and rightfully so. Obviously not the highest ranked losses, but those aren't bad losses. TCU is ranked number 10. And Utah is receiving votes, and frankly, I think Utah's underrated within that as well. And so there's the Notre Dame losses aren't as bad, especially as kind of where they seemed then. They've aged pretty well. So I don't really have a problem with Notre Dame being number 1, but I was, generally speaking, pretty shocked to see UCLA drop from 1, and especially drop from 1 to 3. I thought at worst they would drop to 2. Again, being the only team with 1 loss and it not being some crazy upset, you literally lost to JuJu Watkins having the greatest game of her entire life.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people were kind of waiting to drop UCLA, not in a hater way, but there were a lot of discussions on their strength of schedule, on who they had played. And so I think there was a lot of people that already were very skeptical of UCLA at number 1. And so that felt like confirmation of something they already were thinking. And so it just seemed too easy to drop them. You also have to kind of look at the points. You have 733 total going to Notre Dame. There's only 15 separating them and Texas, so a pretty neck and neck 1-2, and then 718 from Texas to 694 from UCLA. So we're seeing a span of 40-ish points there, and then it's 25 something from UCLA to USC. So what I'm saying is you look at sort of the tiers, and there's a pretty solid group at the top. There's a little bit of a gap, and then we get into the other multi-loss teams of
Mm-hmm.
Southern Cal, a little bit of a drop Connecticut, little bit of a drop South Carolina, LSU, and then a pretty big drop past number 7 to Ohio State. Like we're definitely seeing the very, very top separate themselves, but there's some shuffling, there's some sort of infighting up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, just the fact that South Carolina dropped to 6 from 2 is wild. And I mean, I get that, like, it's not just, you
From
can't think of like,
4,
oh, just
because they had lost the week before.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I think honestly, I think also South Carolina dropping, like, again, they were already a bit lower, but it's also a byproduct of like USC having to move up.
That's what I was
UConn was also, it was like there was just so much movement that, like, I think the South Carolina drop, again, I mean, it's only 2 spots, but obviously like it still feels massive, especially for South Carolina, where we've just grown so accustomed to seeing them at the very tippy top of the rankings. But yeah, I think that was more so like a byproduct of the other movement that happened, whether it be Texas winning against LSU or, you know, what, like all those different things. But to Jamie's point, I feel like, and I think that the rankings reflect this pretty well. I feel like right now we have, generally speaking, 7 contenders right now, and I feel like the top 7 like pretty heavily reflects that. Obviously, there's teams like Ohio State, for example, that can get hot and like have the talent and capability to make it to a Final Four and make a run. But I think from you go Notre Dame, Texas, UCLA, USC, UConn, South Carolina, LSU. Like if you told me that's the pool of contenders, I have no real qualm with that at all. So I mean,
yeah,
I feel like the rankings relatively reflect it. Again, I'm a little surprised at number 1, not because Notre Dame doesn't have a case to it, but because I didn't think UCLA did enough to lose it.
Yeah, and like now I just kind of pulled up South Carolina like rankings history, and yeah, the last time they were ranked this low, like 6, was 2020, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, and they only have like the AP high and the AP final. So like the last time they finished the season at a 6 was 2021, and then they have a bad season in 2018, 2019, where they were 16 at the end. But then again, it's like 7-3-3. Like it's very rare for this team to be a lower than 3.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, it's like complicated because again, you have like UConn gets this massive win. You have USC gets this massive win. Texas has kind of been like quietly getting these big wins.
I've really come around on Texas, like especially to seeing them in person. Like they just do enough to keep themselves outside of the South Carolina game. Like if you kind of like throw that game out, which like I mean, but
which
like
they bounce back, like they
exactly that you go and beat South Carolina, and like they feel like they do enough to keep themselves in games. And like anytime that it got like 11-12, because they came back to beat LSU. And like anytime that happened, like they seem like a lock-in. So even like when the offensive side of the ball isn't working for Texas, which I still have my worries about, and how Madison Booker it's kind of make or break. If she was able to get it done from the free throw line in this game, as opposed to the shooting percentage and like the pure like field goals. So like you still find a way to get it done, and Roy Harmon had some big buckets as well. So I still have my hesitancies on the offensive side, but Texas just does such a good job of keeping themselves in games that you can then rely and turn to those players that you trust to go and get it done for you if you're Vic Schaefer at the end of games.
Yeah, the analogy that just popped into my head for Texas, and you guys are gonna laugh at this because wrestling's now on Netflix, so I like when I'm bored, I just kind of like throw something on in the background. So I've been watching a lot of WWE randomly. But Texas to me feels like when you're in a Royal Rumble and there's like that person who comes in like 10 to 20 and they just kind of like vibe at the edge of the like ring for a little bit and then just like bounce in at the end. Texas.
I can get behind that. I can get behind that. Yeah, I mean, true. Like that's like where Texas is like. I kind of feel like Texas and USC are kind of like
they're hanging around. They're waiting for their opportunity, and then they have the potential to just like boom, get it at the end.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I think it comes down to because like their defense and their ideology is going to travel in March. Yeah. Now it truly just comes down to like if Madison Booker starts just like on a hot streak in March, they can I mean, there's nothing that they can't win. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, they're number 2 in the nation for a reason. But I
Yeah.
think it comes down to
And people might
how
forget
she can produce.
that she was
And
an
when
like, an
Rory's, like,
All-American, like, a
Mhm.
preseason All-American. Like, it was, Madison Booker up there with JuJu and Paige and Kiki and Hannah Hidalgo. Like,
Mhm.
she
No,
has
Madison's legit. It's just
Yeah.
it's truly just the shooting percentage, really. Again, was able to get it done from the free throw line, and really the whole team from Texas, they go 21-21 from the free throw line in this game, and like where points were a premium, that was massive for them, and Madison Booker led the way with that. But yeah, I mean, again, it travels. I'm surprised to see them at number 2. Like that would not be how I rank it. Again, that's out of respect to UCLA than it is any type of like anything negative on Texas, because obviously they've picked up massive. I mean, they just ran through a gauntlet of South Carolina, Kentucky, LSU, and like did so with, especially in comparison to the competition they were playing, with relative ease. I mean, the LSU game got a little wicked, but the South Carolina game, like they pretty much had that under control for the entirety of that game, and then Kentucky they just destroyed. Again, really like what I'm seeing from Texas. Felt a lot better after seeing it in person. Like I left that game feeling confident in what Texas can do.
Yeah.
Again, they kind of needed these big wins to me to kind of prove it. South Carolina, they go and do that. Like after that first South Carolina blowout, I'm like, okay, well, I felt like they were shook at the beginning of that game. Obviously, they can't make a shot in that game. So like I try not to like put too much stock into it, but it's hard to get a loss like that out of your brain, like when you're thinking about a team, until they go and give you something else to think about, and they've certainly done that over the past week.
Yeah, I pulled up the schedule coming up to see like what we have going. There aren't like very many top 10. I don't think there's any like top 10 matchups. There's a few like ranked matchups. The one that I thought was funny that I'll mention is South Carolina's playing Vanderbilt this week.
Uh-oh.
On Sunday. So that's going to definitely be one that we end up talking about, because you all know our like random side quest that is Vanderbilt this season.
Michigan State USC is Wednesday night. That's tomorrow when we're recording this. They almost picked off UCLA without Lauren Betts, so that could be a fun one.
Yeah, there's Notre Dame and NC State. That one's interesting. LSU Kentucky is another interesting one on Sunday. Yeah, so I was just kind of coasting through to see if we had any, I think this last weekend was a little bit bigger on the top 10 matchups.
As
but
far as
I mean,
like
Alabama,
poll implications, I think West Virginia has a chance at TCU for sure.
Yeah, sure.
I think West Virginia is the kind of team that could go on the road and win.
Yeah. So that's probably another one that to keep an eye on. But there's none of these like big marquee. Also, like randomly, why was USC UCLA on Peacock of all things? That annoyed me.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, it was rough. But anyways, again, now we're pushing an hour, so we'll get into that next week. But
not the Peacock stuff, the other stuff though.
Yeah, the other stuff. Not the Peacock stuff. Just do better. That's all we're gonna do.
Yeah, that's the take.
That's the take from that. But still, like these rankings, I feel like more than ever of the past like maybe 5 years, like could go anywhere. Yeah. And I feel like with the seed, like we're gonna start talking about like seeding soon for tournaments and all of that. That's gonna be wild. But we'll get into that next week because again, we are pushing an hour. But thank you so much for watching. If you wanted to go see what our takes were going into these games last week, and then come back to see how we were wrong. Or don't. I was like, I'm just gonna go see what we said, and but that's the beauty of basketball, man. Like I like that we were kind of somewhat proven wrong.
I regret nothing.
Yeah, I regret nothing. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. You can check us out on social media. Jamie, Tyler, and myself, our social media handles are there, but also check out Her Hoop Stats. Most of all of the stats we pull during the podcast come from Her Hoop Stats, and they're incredible. That whole network is just, there's so much to dive into, so many little things to compare players to and stuff. So check that out if you haven't already, and all the other podcasts on the network. But until next week, this has been the Press Break Podcast. Thank you for watching.